Hi, my name is Liz and this is the Pink Lookbook. Last week on June 11th, the iconic newspaper dress designed by John Galliano for Dior in the year 2000 was sold at auction. It achieved a record price of 72,000 euros, which is roughly 77,000 US dollars. Today we consider this dress part of pop culture history. One reason is that Sarah Jessica Parker as Carrie Bradshaw wore it in Sex and the City, and the other one is that it kicked off a newspaper print trend in the early 2000s. I remember it was everywhere. I had shoes with this print. I also had a skirt with a similar print. And it is a bit ironic that today this dress is considered iconic, even part of our pop culture history, because when John Galliano launched the collection for Dior at the time, it created a big outcry. It was very scandalous because he glorified homeless people. It was even called homeless chic. So let's take a closer look at this iconic yet scandalous dress, which has been achieving record prices at auctions. Just a side note here, this is a non-sponsored video. I'm just sharing my personal opinion and my research here. This newspaper dress has been achieving record prices at auctions for quite some time now. I have already mentioned the most recent auction by Carrie Taylor Auctions in June 2024, where the dress achieved 72,000 euros. But already in 2022, the dress was sold via Bonhams, and back then the estimated price was between 800 to 1,000 euros, and it was sold for 15,300 euros, which is roughly 16,400 US dollars. So you can see it was already 15 times the estimated price. And in March 2024, another version of this dress sold also via Bonhams, and it achieved yet another record price. It was 23,000 US dollars. And what is very interesting about this dress is that the condition was only marked as good. There were problems with discoloration, the straps were fraying, there were runs in the fabric, there was even a hole, the production tag and the label had been removed, and despite all of these issues, it still achieved a record price of 23,000 US dollars. At the time of filming this video, I found another newspaper dress online for sale on firstdips.com, which is a vintage online platform. It is the dress which Sarah Jessica Parker wore in the movie Sex and the City 2. So the dress appeared on Sex and the City twice. I'm going to go into the details a bit later. This dress was borrowed from Vintage Luxury New York, and it's now being offered for more than 230,000 US dollars. And when I checked before filming this video, it was in 99 carts. So I'm really curious how long it's going to take now until this dress is sold. Let's look into the history of this iconic dress. I mentioned it before. It was designed by John Galliano for Dior. He was the creative director for the house from 1997 until 2011. Before that, he worked for Givenchy, and he was famous for blurring the lines between art and fashion, for challenging the ideals of beauty, for his unconventional shapes, and also for his theatrical runway shows. In 2011, he was dismissed from Dior and also his own label because he made some very controversial comments. It was filmed and then also spread online. I don't want to go into the details here due to the YouTube algorithm, but I'm sure you can find this controversy online. After that, he had been struggling to come back into fashion, and in 2014 he joined Maison Margiela, and this year he made fashion news again with his theatrical runway show for Maison Margiela in spring, and also there were quite a few Maison Margiela outfits by John Galliano at this year's Met Gala. Today we call it the newspaper dress, but actually there were two newspaper dresses, a longer and a shorter version. They were part of Galliano's fall 2000 ready-to-wear collection for Dior. And the most recent dress which was sold in June was a longer version, so this was look 44. And the Sex and the City dress, the shorter version, was look 34 of the collection, and this collection was also called Fly Girl Collection. This was not the first time that Galliano used this famous newspaper print. He used it for his spring couture collection of the same year, and it was used for the first look. It was a very wide cut pair of trousers with this newspaper print. This collection was criticized not because of the newspaper print, it was criticized because it was very scandalous that his source of inspiration was homeless people. John Galliano said he was inspired by the homeless that he saw at night in the streets of Paris, and he put that into this collection that basically deconstructed haute couture. When we consider this was an haute couture collection, it did not really correspond to what people back then thought about haute couture. So this was this whole outcry. He also said that he was inspired by the balls of the Parisian elite in the 1920s and 1930s. Back then it was very fashionable for the rich to dress up like the poor. These balls also had a name which I'm not going to say on YouTube, but this source of inspiration, of course, just fueled this whole scandal. The rich people dressing up like the homeless, so you can already see why this collection caused a big scandal. Today, probably most people remember this scandal caused by Galliano, but he was actually not the only person glorifying this homeless chic at the time. A bit later, in 2009, Amy Odell wrote an article on The Cut about the Sartorialist, the blog by Scott Schumann, where he photographed a homeless person. I have to admit, when I read this article as preparation for this video, I had very mixed feelings about it. Not only the fact that there was this trend and this picture, but also how this article was written. I'm really curious what you are thinking about this, so please let me know in the comments below. And I also decided to read it out to you. It is a bit long, but I really want to give you an idea of this article and this trend at the time. I'm directly quoting from the article now. Scott Schumann, the Sartorialist, usually doesn't shoot homeless people because he most often doesn't find it romantic or appealing. However, one homeless man on the Bowery wearing blue boots recently changed his mind. At first, Schumann noticed the shoes, but late, upon closer inspection, he noticed his coordinating blue socks, gloves and glasses. Schumann writes, "This shot isn't about fashion, but about someone who, while down on his luck, hasn't lost his need to communicate and express himself through style. Looking at him dressed like this makes me feel that in some way he hasn't given in or given up." This is what the Sartorialist wrote, and now Odell closes the article. After the homeless chic cover of September's Italian Vogue and Els awarding an internship to a homeless girl, it seems homelessness is having a fashion moment. But the Olsens figured that out years ago. I'm really curious to hear your views on this article 15 years after it was published. I tried to find this picture by the Sartorialist, but it disappeared from his blog. This article also referred to a September cover of Italian Vogue in 2009. This cover was shot by Steven Meisel, and it featured male and female models who looked disheveled and gave the impression of being homeless. Some people said this homeless trend was enforced in the aftermath of the crisis kickstarted in 2008. I don't really know what to think about this whole trend. I do understand why it was scandalous, but I really look forward to hearing your view on this. So you can imagine the outcry about this haute couture collection, but despite this scandal, John Galliano still launched this ready-to-wear collection with the same source of inspiration. He also included a lot of fur. He used chinchilla, sable and mink, and paired these furs with silk boudoir dresses. So this is also a reference to the balls of the elites in the 1920s and the 1930s, which I mentioned before. This famous newspaper print features the Christian Dior daily, which Galliano created for this collection. And this print was not only on the famous two dresses, but also on coats and jackets, on slips which were worn underneath sheer dresses, and also on tops, for example. Galliano was actually inspired by another very famous designer for this print. He was actually inspired by Elsa Schiaparelli, who used a newspaper print in 1935. And her source of inspiration was during a trip to Denmark. She saw the wives of fishermen who wore hats that were made from newspaper, and she reported about this in her autobiography Shocking Life. So this was then basically the source of inspiration for her print, and this print featured newspaper clippings about Schiaparelli herself. But also Elsa Schiaparelli was not the inventor of this newspaper print. We actually have to travel to Melbourne to the year 1886, where we meet Matilda Butters, who was the wife of an Australian politician. At a fancy dress ball, she wore a custom-made dress made from 31 custom-printed silk satin pieces, and they featured 13 plates from different Melbourne newspapers. And obviously Matilda Butters really enjoyed wearing this dress because she was seen 2 more times in it. And later on, after Schiaparelli used it for her designs, the newspaper print was also seen on one of the very first bikini designs or modern bikini designs by Louis Réard in the late 1940s. We can already see where Galliano's reputation comes from, that he's not shying away from scandal. Maybe he's even enjoying it, I don't know. But he kept using this newspaper print despite this whole scandal around the collection. He kept using it also for further collections for Dior, but also for his own label. And as I mentioned before, this newspaper print became really popular. It was everywhere in the early 2000s, and many other designers and brands actually copied it. And needless to say, the dress itself achieved cult status after Sarah Jessica Parker as Carrie Bradshaw wore it in Sex and the City. It was in season 3, episode 17, which is called What Goes Around Comes Around. And Patricia Field was the costume designer for the show, and she paired this dress not only with the signature Carrie necklace in gold, but also a Fendi baguette bag and Manolo Blahnik heels. This was quite some time ago, so if you need a refresher, Carrie Bradshaw wears this short version of the dress towards the end of the episode. She ambushes Mr. Big and his then wife Natasha at a restaurant, and then Natasha says, "Now not only have you ruined my marriage, you've also ruined my lunch." Carrie then leaves the restaurant and walks along the streets of Manhattan in this dress, in this whole ensemble. And we know that Patricia Field actually put a lot of thought into the designs. They very often had a meaning. It is not a coincidence that Patricia Fields picked this particular dress for the scene, because Carrie did something scandalous while wearing a scandalous dress. So we have the dialogue of the outfit and the character. And this dress became so iconic that it actually made a comeback in the movie Sex and the City 2. And I mentioned this dress before. It is currently available online if you have a few dollars to spend. It is not the exact same dress from season 3, episode 17, because it is the same model, this look 34, but the print placement is different. And now I really look forward to hearing your opinion. What do you think about this newspaper print dress? Do you like it, and do you think the prices are justified? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could give it a like and if you could subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in more fashion related articles, you can head over to my website thepinklookbook.com, and you can also check out my fashion label Pelagona. And if you enjoyed this video about this iconic design from the year 2000, I have another video for you where I share what we really wore before and after Y2K. Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you in the next one.